What's cracking, everybody? So, I got tagged by Jack Luck 4, Heather, my close friend, and thank you, Heather. I appreciate it, babe. I always like I like getting tagged because it gives me an excuse to do a video. My job that I've been in for the last, it's gonna be 5 months now, really just takes up so much of my time, and I work nights and weekends. The more I work, the more I can potentially make, and that's just the reality. It's not because I'm greedy, it's because it's survival. There you are, Heather. So Heather tagged me, and basically the deal was worst experience with a teacher, worst school policy, those three things. Worst experience with a teacher, I would probably say, was in high school. I had a couple. Understand where I grew up. I grew up in Oxon Hill, Maryland, which was just outside of the Southeast DC line. If you don't know what Southeast DC is like, or you don't know anything about it, you know, every major city has their ghetto type area and their urban jungles, and that's what Southeast DC is. And that's what Oxon Hill was too. Wasn't quite so much back in the 80s, 70s and 80s growing up, but in the mid 80s, early to mid 80s, it got that way. Especially after I left there, it just got even more urban and tougher. But it was a tough place to grow up. I mean, it was very culturally diverse. To understand, you know, a little bit about that, you know, it was a predominantly African American area. I mean, I grew up, I never saw it this way, but somebody who was looking from the outside in would perceive it, or probably label it as me growing up as a minority. I was one of, maybe, I could count on 2 hands, and I wouldn't use all my fingers, that I remember the number of white kids in my middle school, 7th and 8th grade, an entire school, if that tells you anything. Now, I had lots of friends, but I also had a lot of people that were gunning for me. Didn't like me because of this. So, and by that I mean the color of my skin. And I don't make any bones about that, man. I don't scream discrimination in any way. It made me the person I am today. It tempered me as a young man, and made me stronger. I firmly believe that. And it was rough, but it was an experience I wouldn't give up now. Anyway, to understand, I had some altercations with some teachers back in elementary school and middle school. But you got to understand that area, those teachers were on guard all the time, you know, with some of the kids they had to deal with. Now, not everybody was a discipline case, but it was pretty tough. It was pretty tough. I had one old elementary school, had this one old guy, substitute teacher, used to chase kids around the room with a yardstick and try to smack them, hit them. And I mean, he'd throw shit at us, tell us he was gonna whoop us. I mean, like taking a switch and whoop us kind of stuff. But he had the yardstick, and he got a couple of us too. But we used to laugh, you know, because yeah, he was crazy, man. And I had a couple of mainly verbal altercations with teachers in high school. Probably my worst experience was a cross between it was a teacher that I got into a verbal altercation with and got face to face with, and that was a female teacher. Now, I didn't jump in her face, she got into mine. But I didn't have a problem with authority back then, and it wasn't that I was mouthing off to people all the time. I just, you know, if I thought they were being unreasonable or unfair, I would tell them. I wouldn't always tell them in the most reasonable manner, but I would tell them when I was irritated and pissed off about something. So I had one female teacher, you know, give me a hard time, and she had this dragon breath, man. She smoked and drank like a chimney and never brushed her teeth, man, in between classes. And so I got up and moved seats because she was hawking me, and it was a breath, that stink was in my face, and so I got up to move. She's like, "Where are you going?" I said, I'm moving. And she told me to get back there, and I wouldn't go back there, and she said something to me, and I basically mouthed off to her, and, you know, and she came right up and got in my face, and of course I was smiling, and I said something very, wasn't real derogatory, but I said something really smart alecky, and it pissed her off because she realized that I had no fear of her. So she sent me to the principal's office, where the vice principal, who was a fucking hard ass, big guy too, huge, intimidating guy, who I ended up getting into a verbal back and forth debate with him, because he was basically telling me, now I was not a disciplinary case by any means, I was a pretty good kid, but he's like, you know, you're not going to do this in my school, and you think you're going to come in here and you'll be out of here if that's. And I was like, look, dude, don't threaten me with throwing me out of school. I'm like, look at my record. You're not going to throw me out of school, man. So don't try to intimidate me. Don't threaten me. I don't appreciate it. If you got to call my parents, but I'm telling you, you're not going to bring that threat shit to me, basically, is what I said to him. And we went back and forth. Now, he told me he respected me for me standing my ground, at least making an argument for my case for myself. Though, you know, his problem was the fact that he didn't want me to just disregard authority, and I told him that's not what I was doing. But I respected him for, you know, making his case and at least backing off a little bit. So that was probably my worst experience with a teacher. Worst teacher, it would be a toss-up between my geometry teacher, who was the other person I got into a verbal altercation with, who was an idiot, by the way, who just sat there with the book and the answers and put the answers on the problems and the tests, and couldn't explain to you why these answers were the answers. Couldn't explain to you how to get from where you were, which might have been wrong or slightly off, to where the right answer was. Couldn't do it. He was an awful, awful teacher. That and my economics teacher, which pisses me off now, because all the things that I research and get into, I wish the fucking guy would have taught economics. But he used to come in and talk about what was on Star Trek. What was on the episode of Star Trek the night before. Big Trekkie. Don't get me wrong, dude. I got my inner geek too, and I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek. You know, I used to watch with my old man. But it was like, fuck. You know, we're not going to get tested on Star Trek. So it was really tough. And I would say, and like Ella said, I was uninspired a lot. I had a lot of uninspiring teachers, people who just went through the motions. And, you know, it's hard, man. It's hard to be inspired. It's hard to want to do something when you're not inspired. Worst school policy. There's so many. Teaching abstinence. Teaching abstinence as a school policy. And I know I'm probably going to draw some controversy for that. But look, you know, I want to keep it real. You know, young people nowadays are a lot more sexually active. They're a lot more aware of themselves. I think it has a lot to do with the development of their bodies, the development of their brains. And, you know, a lot of the development of their bodies and the things like this, I think, has a lot to do with the growth hormones and the things that we put into our food that causes these things to happen. And that might be a side note. You know, that might be just a detail from the whole picture, but they're more aware now. And so we need to teach these young people. We don't need to teach them, we don't need to tell them, scare them, but we need to educate them as to the consequences of their actions. Because without them understanding the consequences, they don't have any fear of anything, because it hasn't happened to them. But if they understand what could happen, if you paint a good enough picture, if you use enough psychology to paint a good enough picture, they're going to get it to a large degree. And if they don't, they might end up in that situation. But they might think about it. And you can and show them examples. Find some kids you know. Some kids you talk about, kids you knew. Find some kids they know and point them out. So, you know, some of these kids it's not going to reach. Some of them it will. You got to fight for them. So, yeah, that's a big one for me. I'm almost out of time. School uniforms, I think, is fucked. You know, it's a freedom of expression. I think it can be. I think, you know, dressing a certain way can be taken a little too far. I'm not beyond that, so, you know, don't jump on that bandwagon. But zero tolerance. No child left behind. I've got so many things. You know, I know Heather's such a close friend. We've talked so much over the last year, and I know so much about her kids and their situation and her activism, probably more than most. And I only hope to be as active as she is in my kids' lives and in their schools and fighting for their rights and things like that. So, because I think that's important. If you don't take any chances, you don't get anything. And even if they tell you no, you still fight for it until you've exhausted every opportunity. That's just how I feel. But anyway, that's my vlog. It was kind of off the cuff. I was running some errands, so I haven't, that's what I'm doing. But anyway, that's me. I hope everybody got my answers. Please feel free to respond. I'm not tagging anybody. Make a video if you want or comment. So thanks again, Heather. Love you. And I will holler at everybody later. Peace.